Everyone, thanks for joining us on this rather miserable February evening, but we're all hopefully inside safe and sound, and thank goodness we all have electricity right now. Anyway, so as Caitlin mentioned, my name is Martha Maxwell Doyle. I'm with the Barnegat Bay Partnership, which is a national estuary program. And let me see if I can advance this. And we're one of 28 national estuary programs that was established under Section 320 of the Clean Water Act. And we've been in existence for about 20 years. And we've actually just recently updated our comprehensive conservation management plan to include things that we didn't really think about 20 years ago, which included climate change. So part of my area of interest is wetlands and climate resiliency. So a little over a decade ago, while I was at a second NEP, the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, we started thinking about the impacts of, well, first off, we didn't have a full understanding of our coastal wetlands. There was no one entity that was doing that kind of monitoring. So the Partnership of the Delaware Estuary, along with the state of Delaware, started up a comprehensive wetlands monitoring program. And so what our primary interest was, what are the current conditions? And then as far as the future goes, in terms of sea level rise, will they be able to keep pace? And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this sea level rise slide. It gets used by pretty much everybody when it comes to what's happening with the average high tides and tidal level at Atlantic City. So it's especially important for us on the Atlantic coast because elevation isn't that high, and obviously looking at 2050, an additional 1.3 feet of water is going to make a big difference about what happens here. So as I mentioned, we were really concerned about the rapid loss of shorelines, the fact that we were seeing more storms of higher intensity, sea level rise, which I just mentioned, and then overall the impact that the loss of wetlands would have in terms of declining in water quality and water supply. And you're not supposed to memorize this, but this is a graphic that shows all the different things that wetlands, their functions and their values. And that's a whole nother lecture, and that's not what we're here for, but I want to give everybody just an overview of the complexities of monitoring wetlands. So as I mentioned, our causes for concern, obviously anyone, especially in the Barnegat Bay area, is very familiar with the amount of coastal development. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. And anywhere you see in a lagoonal community, they were built on top of coastal wetlands. Also changes and alterations in sediments, and why is sediment important to wetlands? It's to help wetlands keep pace with sea level rise. The sediment lays on top of the wetlands and allows the wetlands to continue to grow. In a system like Barnegat Bay, which is essentially an estuarine lagoonal system, we don't have the massive input of sediment like somewhere on the Delaware River. So and that directly correlates with whether or not wetlands can survive. So, and then other impacts, increases in tidal range, we've talked about salinity changes, and then just this acceleration of shoreline erosion. So we established the Mid-Atlantic Coastal Wetlands Assessment. These are the primary partners besides BBP and PDE. And that program's we're going on our 12th year now. And just quick, these are what our primary goals were when we set out to do this, because not only were we worried about condition, but we were also wanted to be able to help factor in on decision making, to help regulators and resource managers do a better job as far as how do we help protect, preserve, or improve the wetlands that we have. So really briefly, and there's a means to my end here. Our primary research goals I've already stated, and what we did was we took a team of folks through PD, the National Estuary Programs, and then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Academy of Natural Sciences. And we implemented this multi-tier monitoring and assessment program. And in each one of these, each tier has a different focus, tier 1 being remote sensing, high level, desktop type activities. Tier 2 is more of the ground truthing, rapid assessments that we get involved in, and that we do intensive studies. And then we have these long-term monitoring sites, which have been we've been collecting data from for over the last 12 years. And so just really the point, and of course, out of that, we've produced a number of reports and those kinds of things. But I think what I want to emphasize here before handing this over to Steve is that the work that we do is very labor intensive. And, being out on the wetlands is really nice in the spring and in the fall when you've got great weather. But, in the summertime, it's really hot. There's a lot of labor involved. And we also want to find better ways and continue to utilize technologies to help us monitor these large wetland complex areas. So with that, we were in contact with Steve Jacobus at DEP, and we were really interested in exploring with him ways that we could use drones, both currently and into the future, to help us do that. So, and that's really what the bulk of the presentation will be. So what I'd like to do at this point is just hand this over to Steve. I'll stop sharing my screen and take any questions that anyone might have. I know this is, like I said, this really wasn't meant to be a whole wetlands tutorial, but just trying to give everyone a sense of how we're starting to utilize other technologies other than the boots on the ground. So, Steve.
Great, thanks, Martha. If there are any other questions at this time so far, feel free to place them in the chat. Yeah, Steve, you can go ahead and share your screen.
All right, now I got to figure this one out.
You can see it.
Is that it?
Yep.
Oh, right. That's the fastest I've gotten that done so far. Okay, like Martha said, my name is Steve Jacobus. I'm with the Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. I think my latest title is Chief Pilot and Program Manager for our Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems program. Let's get this in. All right. Back in 2017, I went to the Partnership for Delaware Estuary Science Conference and sat in on a session about using drones to monitor wetlands, and I was hooked. Unfortunately, I didn't have the $45,000 to buy the drone that they were using, but I thought it would be great just to get a little quadcopter with a camera to fly out and get pictures to document the restoration projects that we were doing. So that I didn't, and literally I was being lazy. I didn't want to walk out in the marsh and trample everything that we planted. Little did I know what I was getting myself into at that point. Why use drones? Drones give us, for years, we've relied on aerial photos to look at the sites from the air. And even in the department, we do it flyovers every 5 years. So you get in the middle of the thing, you're looking at photos that are 2 to 3 years old already and not really giving you a good sense of where you are. And you don't always get to pick what time or what conditions you're flying over. But with the drone, you get a new perspective. Instead of just seeing, when you're, especially in the marsh, when you're just standing there, everything looks the same all around you. With a drone, you can get up in the air, you can see exactly what's around you, how it changes if you're 10 feet away from you, and how interrelated the whole system becomes. The best part is it's easily repeatable. after we plan the first flight, it can repeat it at any time we can get out there. Gives you a flexibility to do a little bit more intent, be able to look at the changes more often. Like if you want to go out directly after a storm when it's safe, you can go out and then compare that to what it was. You can really see and analyze the changes that occur due to specific events. We can fill data gaps. Like I said, looking at aerials every 5 years, you don't get a good sense of it. One of the amazing things to me working on the coastal area is that people can take 2 photos from different times and do analysis and make assumptions based on that, you got more water on the marsh or something, without taking into account that they were taken at different tidal ranges. One's at high tide, one's at low tide. With a drone, it's a data gap we can fill. I mean, you want to spend the day out there, we can hit tidal cycles, so you can see exactly what the differences are between high and low tide, and not make the mistake of confusing them. The technology is really expanding. In 2015, you barely heard about the word drone. It was something that was just taking off. It was basically one of the fad Christmas toys that everybody was getting. 2016, the real estate companies discovered drones and annoyed the hell out of everybody by flying them through everybody's backyards. But since then, the usefulness of drones has been seeping into just about every aspect of business, and everybody's found a use for them. So it's getting more and more, and it's getting more and more intense. A lot of the remote sensing information we got was from satellites, or you paid a lot of money to have a plane fly it. You're not going to get the same aerial coverage for it, but the sensors that they use there are now being made smaller and fitted on drones. So you can really get, the processes are in place, but now we can get much more detailed data by flying it with a drone. And PR opportunities, most of the work I have is people who just want drone footage. Everybody loves a drone. Everybody loves a picture from the drone, whether they know what it is or not. As you can see, the pictures I have up here, I took, it's an island in the middle of a pond, but I got out there in the summer, and I also went back in the fall, and you can see, it gives you the range to see the changes. And then I'll just throw this one in. Sometimes you just want to see the forest for the trees. Come on, keep going. But even here, standing in the middle of the woods, you could only basically see the trees. Once I get halfway up, you can start seeing out where the ponds are, where the water is. And then if you're really lost, you can get an idea of where you are. I know our forest fire people actually were using drones basically just to sync themselves with the aerial maps that they were having to figure out where they were. I do practice flights at a ball field, and I take these pictures just to show you the flexibility you have with using a drone. We can go up high and you can see the entire ball field. You can go up and see the lights, do inspection on the lights, and then you can zoom down and actually get a picture and read the numbers off the pitcher's mound, or fly out into the outfield and see what's on the fence. Now, this is all within about 4 or 5 minutes, and you've got all of this data that you can look at. Now, getting back to the aerials, like I said, for years we've relied on the aerials. I took a couple of aerials here and a drone photo that I took, and these are all relatively from the same height. The 2012 photo was taken in the spring, before the growing season. It's just basically a blur. You can kind of make out some of the beach. The 2013 was taken in the growing season, but it's totally blurry. I love the 2015 because it's points to what I said before. It was taken at high tide. I can't see the beach at all. But when you look at the drone aerial that it took, relatively the same height, we can get down. You can see the footprints in the beach. So the amount of detail you can pull off of a drone shot is ultimately better than anything we could have gotten off of the aerials. And the thing being is, I remember each one of those aerial photos were taken. They were slightly better than the ones before. And at the time, it's like, wow, look how good we're getting. And now it's like, oh, look how bad it is. Now, something I have always wanted to say since watching all of those reality shows. Don't try this at home. We're professionals. The issue is drone. You may think of the drone as a toy and therefore and not really pay much attention to where you're using it. But the small unmanned aircraft systems are regulated by the FAA just as if it is a manned aircraft. If the drone is over with payload is over 0.55 pounds, it needs to be registered with the FAA. And regardless of size, if you use it for anything other than just flying around for fun, it has to be flown by a certified remote pilot. To get your the remote pilot certification, you have to pass an exam on aeronautical knowledge, which includes knowing the Part 107 rules for flying the small unmanned aircraft systems. You have to understand the airspace, weather, manned aircraft operations, and basically you're learning you have to know everything that a pilot of a manned aircraft basically knows. The one thing that you don't need to know to get your certification is actually how to fly the drone. Nobody tests you on that. When I first started this, all I wanted to do was get a drone, go up and take some pictures. Like I said, I didn't know what I was getting into. Flying a drone is almost as complicated and requires as much planning as flying a manned aircraft. It's not a piece of equipment that you're going to go and just decide to go out and use on a given day, wherever or however you want to do it. Before you go out, you have to figure out the airspace you'll be flying in, whether or not you need authorization from the FAA or the airport nearby. You have to fly. You have to check on there are no fly zones for drones. We have temporary flight restrictions that apply to drones just as it does to manned aircraft. And you basically have to really plan out your flight because the drones I fly have about a 20-minute air time that we're going to get out of a battery. It's not something that you can just go up in the air and then figure out what you want to do. You'll run out of battery. In addition to that, in addition to the FAA rules, we have other federal, state, local rules and policies governing drone operations. So you may need permits to fly in an area, or you may need property owner permission. Being the drone with a camera at low level, we have a lot of the local laws are really basically dealing with privacy and trespassing. The municipalities, if they want, they can basically apply their privacy and trespassing rules against you. Basically, as a rule of thumb, from what I found flying in New Jersey, if you're going to fly over any federal, state, or county lands, you will require a special use permit. Then, actually, while you're flying, you're low man on the totem pole as far as the air traffic in space. It's up to you to see and avoid all other air traffic. Then you also have to watch out for people on the ground, anything going on the ground, wildlife. Eagle or an osprey can easily take out a drone if they get mad enough at it. But I've also run into areas where you fly over and all of a sudden you get a flock of birds come up. It's not a good thing for the drone. And what's really getting nasty now, the FAA basically will apply a civil fine, and their yardstick is no reckless flying that endangers air traffic or people or property on the ground. As a former regulator, I would love that. That is so vague, you can get anything. And basically it can come down to is, did you check the weather? And if you say no, you're flying recklessly. A recreational pilot in Philadelphia recently was fined $183,000 for violations he made over 26 flights that he live streamed. He wasn't certified. It falls under the category of what the FAA considers professional. That doesn't mean you get paid for it or not. It's just basically anything other than flying for fun. Now, the FAA did approach him and tried to educate him that he was doing wrong, and he basically just flipped them off. So they turn around, and the worst part about all this is by doing a video, you just basically documented what you did wrong all by yourself. And I think I think just about every video I've seen, somebody takes a selfie of themselves and just verifies that they're doing it wrong. Other things going on recently, back in December, a recreational pilot in LA saw some police action going on at midnight and decided he was going to put his drone up in the air to check on it. He ended up colliding with an LA police helicopter, and they did track it down. They tracked it back to him, and he basically got arrested. He's facing not only fines, but he's facing a potential year in jail. So it's getting serious. More recently, the Super Bowl, there was a temporary flight restriction, no flying within 3 miles of the stadium, and that went into effect a couple of days before the Super Bowl. The FBI arrested 2 people for flying drones in the TFR. They are basically not only facing fines, they are facing a potential year in prison. So flying a drone is not, if you're going to use it for something, even if you're just flying recreational, you got to know where you're flying and what the rules are. There are some really hefty fines to it. All right, get all that out of the way. What can you do with a drone? Basically, for photos and videos, you can do that with just about any low-end commercial drone that you have. Even some of the recreational drones. You have a camera. They're really getting good cameras on it. You're generally somewhere between a 12 and 20 megapixel camera. You can go up higher, and basically all the video cameras will give you HD video. That's a simple one. Basically, all you would need to do for monitoring with that is get a photo and video editing software. Now, once you get tired of that, like I did, we move into trying to do mapping, point clouds, and 3D models. It's basically taking still photos, and if you really get into high-end Esri stuff, they are starting to do models from videos. But basically you do that with just taking photos, but you're going to need a photogrammetry program to be able to stitch those together into an either a 2D orthorectified map of the area, or a point cloud, which basically just is a 3D model. And then the 3D models you can get, you can take like a house or a sculpture or something. You can use the photos to stitch that together and get a fairly good 3D model of it. You can use that for either documenting structures that you have on site. Now, remote sensing, like I said, pretty much everybody hears remote sensing, but not very many people actually know what that entails. Pretty much that you're starting to get into data. Either you can use it for photos. Primarily, it's really geared towards using sensor data in the going outside the visible light wavelength ranges. And once I start getting into remote sensing, I tend to think of it kind of like like cooking. You're just taking a bunch of ingredients, throwing it together, and seeing what comes out. But basically, it's using a bunch of algorithms, different wavelengths of light to highlight different aspects of things. And going into that, you're going to need potentially specialized software from the sensor manufacturer to decode the data, or some of the photogrammetry software you can do it, or you're going to need somebody who really has a good background with GIS and start getting into. Esri just recently, the last couple of years, came out with another version of GIS software called Pro. And that really is geared towards working with rasters and photos. So there's a lot you can do with that, but again, you need somebody who's somewhat versed in GIS. Now, as far as drones go, one of the biggest mistakes I see people do is they just buy a drone and assume that they can do everything with it. But when you start getting beyond just taking photos or videos, you really need to start looking at what you want to do, figure out which sensor that you need to do that, and then find the drone that will carry that sensor. Okay, again, getting all that out of the way, let me show you what we actually have done. These are two sites in Brigantine. It was actually the sites I was working on when I first got the idea to use a drone. We had walked out. I'm always a big one for taking pictures of everything every place I've been. So looking at it from this angle give me a new perspective on it. We could take pictures which we could compare in the future as we go back and take pictures again. We can repeat the same pictures and see exactly what the changes are. As you can see here, these are relatively small sites. I was able to just go up and get in one shot a picture of the whole vegetated berm, looking straight down at it and then looking at it from the water side. When I was saying before about trampling the vegetation, if you look at the bottom right picture, if you look on the left side of that, there's this little line that goes towards the house. That's where the homeowner drags his canoe to get to the water. But if you look towards the middle where the goal, where the berm is, if you look right in here, there's these little indentations. That actually happened. That was one day of us going out, and I think it was 5 months before this, where we went out to set up PVC pipes to mark different areas. Didn't even realize at the time, we just all walked in one way. We actually, because it was so muddy, we actually created a channel which drained all the water off the site. So it never really fully grew back. But it's one of the reasons I like the drones. I don't have to do that much damage to the wetlands that we're trying to actually protect. Okay, this was actually the very first video and the very first project that I did. It was basically to evaluate shoreline for a possible restoration project. And basically a 2-minute video, we covered the full 300 meters of shoreline that would have taken someone about an hour on foot to document to look at. From this angle, we can see erosion that came from wave action, erosion that came from overland flow, and you can even see the clumps of dirt and how they're moving away with the tide. The biggest lesson we learned on this was the fact that we wanted to get out there at low tide, and the day we picked was early in the morning. Originally, I was just going to go out there and run the drone parallel to the shoreline and take a picture of the whole shoreline. Till we realized we got out there, we were filming the easterly side of the shoreline, and we were looking straight into the rising sun. So one more thing to do in planning is check the sun angle when you're going out. Now, this is a project I just started working on with Martha last year. It's one of their monitoring sites. This is an example of an orthomosaic map, two-dimensional map. We flew over it. That is now overlaid over our 2015 aerials. Even without ground control points on it, I'm generally within about 5 to 10 feet of our aerials when I do this. But now we have a record from last year during the growing season of what the ponds look like, what the area looks like, and I can go back out at any time now. Next year sometime, go out, we can look at it, we can compare this and see if the pools have expanded, if there's any changes in the vegetation. And just to give you an idea of the resolution, that's zoomed down on the same map, and I found the Barnegat Bay Partnership people out there counting plants in the square.
So just a quick, this is an example of if we had to take an RTK and go around every single pond, it would take us days. And what Steve can do in a matter of a couple hours is incredibly valuable to us as scientists. Sorry, Steve. I had to throw that.
No problem. I didn't throw in there when I first got the drone that nobody was taking me seriously. It was literally about 8 months to a year before Martha decided that I might be able to help. Up until then, I was just the annoying, basic little kid going, I got a drone, what can we do with it? This is basically the first project that I did with Martha. We were doing West Creek, and basically it was a grant for short-term shoreline erosion. Now this one I was filming the West Bank, so I didn't have any problem with the sun. Right. But one of the things that you did is it can just go up, and it gives you, I did a video from fairly high up. You could do a video from the boat, but you're not going to see the area behind it, on the marsh, and see exactly how everything's working. Another thing here is this is in the Edwin Forsyth Wildlife Refuge under control of U.S. Fish and Wildlife. I did need a special use permit in order to get permission to fly in that area, and we got permission for 2018 and 2019, but in 2020 we could not. Martha got the permission to do the monitoring, but we couldn't get permission to use the drone in the area. And that is basically with cybersecurity issues.
It was it was a national policy for Fish and Wildlife. So yeah, we're hoping this summer we can get back out again.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Now here, I did an ortho, and we actually have did three flights over this. We did a baseline, which is what you're seeing. We went out right after a nor'easter in November after we did this, and we went back out the year after that. But what I can actually do here is overlay them, and then just in GIS, I just do a swipe, and you can actually see the changes that occur. And zooming in on this, we can get better, and you can actually see the changes to the shoreline. This is right after the nor'easter. And I get particularly, see if I can do this. I can. All right. If you notice right in here where the bulge is, and then we have the boat, but we lost quite a bit of shoreline right in that area. But that is one of the benefits of the drone. Like I said, if we try to rely on aerial photos and look at the changes, I can't get to that resolution with them, and B, they're 5 years apart, so you don't really know what occurred in that 5 years to actually cause the erosion. With the drone, we can have an event of extremely high tide, a nor'easter, and we can get out there as soon as it's safe afterwards and get a good documentation of what occurred because of that event. Now, this is Iowa Port in Little Lake Harbor. Actually, I worked on this in my old job as a living shoreline coordinator, and then Martha was working with Little Lake Harbor, and they were doing the monitoring of it. So we kind of got together over this project. And when you get into for PR, this is a nice little thing that you can do. I still have to figure out how not to get myself in the shots though. That takes a little more planning. But as I say, I can go through on the before, and then we can go through on the after. It's a very nice visual showing you what the changes are. And I can do that for a wetland area, for that. And believe me, like I said, people love videos, drone videos. But from going in and doing the orthographic mapping, again, this is the before, and then that's the after. So you can go down and you can actually see exactly what's changed. And to really zoom down, this was right after they finished construction. And I have that, I overlay, I think it was about 9 months later. And you can see at this resolution, I can actually match up individual stones in the wall there and see if they moved. The one thing that we can see here, if you look at this area right here, and you notice the grayer stone, that's really smaller stone, not as large as what they did in the main bulkhead there. But after 8 months, you can see most of that, excuse me. Okay, what you can see is most of that small stone eventually washed out. There's piles of it up here, and a lot more probably got washed out into the water. But like I said, from a monitoring standpoint, to see what the changes are, I can go down, I can actually see, you can actually go down and look and see the actual stones and see if they moved.
So for us in New Jersey, it's really important to be able to have this kind of ability as we start to put in these nature-based living shoreline type things, because there's so many lessons learned, and it'll only make the community of practice even better. So
yeah, this is fairly new technology for us. Conceptually it works, but we don't have a lot of hard evidence and hard data on how it works or where it works. Now getting into a 3D model. This is another one of my practice fields where I train our other pilots. But using the drone, flying basically just a circle around the area, we can come up with a 3D model of the building. It's good for documenting buildings or structures. I can use something like this, do a mound, and literally in the software, I can start calculating volumes. So I can go over a fill pile and basically get a good idea, or fairly close idea of how much material is in that. It's a 3D model, but it's what we call point cloud, generated from the photos. I did this with coastal engineering. It's actually Seaside Park. It was a beach fill that they did. I was out with our coastal engineering group to see how well the drone could actually map the beach profile and what the elevations were. Now, in this case, we went out, we had surveyed the ground control points up on the dune and along the water. Actually, another lesson learned, don't put out panels near the waves when the tide's coming in. We had 2 panels wash away on us. But as you can see, it gives me a good 3D rendering. And again, if we zoom down, you can actually see the vehicle tracks in the sand. We is mapping footprints in the sand. Now, the one thing I have is on the beach, I have a nice flat surface. I have no heavy vegetation. With the survey points, we matched up our other control points that we took, and we were literally within an inch of the survey points with what we do with the drone. The downside to this is the way the photogrammetry programs work. It only gets you one return from the top of whatever's there. So when we get into heavy vegetation, like it is in a marsh, where we would be mapping the top of the vegetation, not the ground. So it becomes problematic of trying to get a good ground elevations when we're in a marsh area. And like I said, where it works on the beach, I can go in with, and this is another 3rd program I have, but we can go in and basically just draw a line, and we can get a cross section of the area. So it was a bonus for our coastal engineering group, because it's a quick and dirty way to see after a beach fill if they've actually hit close to their targets and if they got the right slope on the beach. Another little thing I was playing with when I did, this is down at Gandy's Beach, down on the Delaware Bay. We did a 3D model of the beach there, and the program we have allows us to basically just raise the water level. And I know the first time we did this, my partner and we sat there for half an hour just playing with the water going up and down, watching it come through the oyster castles, go in through the little depressions going up through there, and watching it fill right around all the vegetation. It was really eye-opening in the fact of being able to see exactly how the water moves through the area. On the Delaware here, I think we have a 6-foot tidal range. So you really see it. You really see how it moves through and back. And one of the things here is, this is an early project back in 2018. But one of the things you're looking at is everybody assumes that your erosion is pretty much caused by wave action. So it's like trying to mitigate the wave action. But with such a large tidal range in here, when you look at this, you not only have wave action, but there's such a high tide change through there, it actually runs through the vegetation almost like a river would. So you've got there's a secondary energy in there that's causing erosion that you don't really think about unless you're looking at it from something like this. Now, another thing that we've got is using thermal imaging, infrared. Basically, you're just looking at one wavelength of light, and it's measuring the radiation reflection off of objects and translating that into temperatures. So this is one of the reasons why I harp on figuring out the sensor first, because we had the opportunity to buy there's a DJI Mavic dual enterprise, which had a thermal camera and an RGB camera on it, and it was like, oh wow, a thermal camera, we can go out and play with it. We got it, and when I started playing with it, it's like, yeah, it's really good up close, but it's a low resolution camera, and it didn't record any of the data to the actual photograph, so couldn't really do any mapping with it. But as you can see, it gives, and again, low resolution. You're used to seeing, everybody's conditioned to watching TV, seeing an IR camera, and you see everybody perfectly clear, all fingers and all. At 100 feet here, all you would see of a person is a white blob or red blob. So you really need to look at what you're doing. But the thermal can give you a lot of information. As you can see, the temperature range here is blue is colder to red is hot. You can actually see we picked out the clumps of grass that were left. The dirt comes up higher, and in the upper right where it's all red, that's rocks in a detention basin. So it's like, it does work well, but you really have to know what you're doing with it and get a good sensor if you're going to use it for any kind of analysis. What I hope to be moving into this year is multispectral and hyperspectral. Now, this is generally what we have with the Landsat satellites coming over. They do the full hyperspectral range and use a multispectral range to analyze vegetation. Now, basically, what they found if you're looking for looking at trying to measure health of vegetation or so, they basically dropped it down to there's five band wavelengths of light that they use in algorithms to calculate plant health. I know if you probably have heard of the NDVI, Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, which they basically uses. It basically uses red light and near infrared light, which is invisible to a human eye, and it's literally I can't remember this. For a healthy plant is going to be absorbing red light and reflecting the near infrared light. So basically, the algorithm gives you a comparison between what's being, the red light being absorbed and the infrared light being reflected, and it translates into a number between -1 and 1 to tell you basically whether the plant is functioning right, healthy or not. The multispectral basically will take blue light, green light, red light, near edge red, and near infrared. Can't keep remembering all those. While the hyperspectral cameras will give you hundreds of different wavelengths. It just takes continuous wavelengths, and then you basically have a multitude of light waves, wavelength numbers, where you can do algorithms to look at a multitude of different things, even down to trying to analyze what type of material it is. My problem is the multispectral I can get for in around $15,000. We priced out a hyperspectral camera because we were looking at we were looking at the harmful algal blooms and analyzing those. That one, the cheapest one that we found that met our expectations was $63,000. So it's a good tool, but it gets expensive very quickly. The lessons learned, the number one lesson that I've learned from flying drones is nature has its own emojis. Just about every place we fly, we can pick something out. But the number one issue is using a drone is not like grabbing a camera and just going out on site. You really have to plan out your flight. You have to, like I said, you have to know your airspace, get permissions, know your weather, get location access, figure out where you're flying from, what you're flying, and know what you're flying in order to get the best return on it. You have to know what you want to collect. Make sure that you have the right sensor to collect that. You have the right software to process it. And site reconnaissance. I almost got burned on a flight that I was doing because I was relying on a 5-year-old aerial, which showed the area we wanted to fly as a barren farm field. But what I didn't know until I went out there to look at the site was that it was fallow for 5 years, and it was a nice, thick, impenetrable meadow area with some of the largest concentration of ticks I have ever seen. And then basically it's training. You really need to get out. Like I said, you can get your certification and not know how to fly a drone. So you want to get out, you want to train, you want to learn how to fly the drone to make sure, primarily to be able to get out of trouble once you get into it. And also to keep up your skills and work out the different processes you need to do data collection. It's really important to know that, so you know how the drone's going to act, what's going to happen. I train for contingencies, and even when I do that, I run into problems. We were flying a site down at Ocean City. I did everything right. I even filed a NOTAM, which is a notice to airmen, letting telling them where I was flying, how high I was flying, and when I was flying. And I had the drone up at 200 feet doing a mapping run, and my partner taps me on the shoulder and goes, "Helicopter." And I'm thinking there's a helicopter coming in, and I'm getting ready to bring it down. But what it was a Mosquito Commission helicopter, and it was 10 feet off the deck. So all of a sudden, I'm in a situation where my normal way of getting out is bring the drone down, but I'm in a position where if I bring it down, I'm bringing it down on the helicopter. So you really need to be prepared for just about anything, including paparazzi. They follow me around all over the place. That's what I have. I think I ran late again, but if there are any questions.
That was great. Thank you, Steve. I don't think I realized how amazingly detailed and versatile drones can really be until that presentation. So excellent job. We're gonna give you a remote or virtual round of applause. Thank you, Martha and Steve. That was a great talk. I think we have one question in the chat so far. Everybody is saying how fantastic that was. So thank you, everybody. And first question is, are they starting to make sensors that do a little bit of everything? You mentioned you have to pick the right sensor for what you want to do. So is that something that's possible?
It's hard. When you're starting to get into specialized sensors, it's very expensive. They're basically trying to, I can't stop sharing this, can't find that.
At the bottom.
Yeah, I'm not getting, that's, But no, there's a lot of sensors coming out. Depending on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Cameras. I'm sorry, I'm just annoyed by not being able to do this. The cameras, the sensors and cameras are starting to get smaller and put on drones, but when you're getting down to it, you can't start putting too much stuff on the drone. I mean, they're now doing the multi-sensor. We have drones with multispectral cameras on it, which is basically 5 to 6 different sensors on there. But because of weight, now you're looking at you're putting in all these cameras on it, but you're now sacrificing some of the resolution on it because you to fit all the cameras on it.
Right.
Now you can move up to a large, I'm using a DJI Phantom 4 with a fixed camera on it. You can move up to some of the higher end commercial drones, and with where you can have an interchangeable payload. But again, you're really looking at maybe 1 or 2 cameras in there at a time. Right now, the most common combinations are an RGB camera with either an IR camera, or basically you may get a couple of individual sensors for specific wavelengths. But now you're getting into specialized equipment. You're probably going to have to go to a manufacturer to get it made specially. You have to get a special mount depending on what drone they may put in. So like I said, for me, we're talking hyperspectral camera off the shelf is at $63,000.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's real easy. You can, for $2,000, you can pick up a drone and with a camera video, RGB camera video on it and work with that. But it's like that just makes you hungry to get into the more complicated analysis, and then now you're getting into specialized equipment that not only is getting more expensive, it has a higher upkeep and it gets more sensitive to working, more moving parts, more exposed parts. Now, a lot of them, what you'll see is with when you get into the bigger drones, you'll have retractable landing gear. Now, your sensors always on the bottom. One of the biggest problems is people forget to put the landing gear back down when they try to land, and they land on their sensor. So basically, in the next few years, I wouldn't doubt that you're going to see more. I mean, 5 years ago, you had basically just a low-end camera and video camera on the drones. And in the last 5 years, we've went from that through now we now have hyperspectral cameras, camera drones. 5 years ago, nobody would, it basically progressed from camera to cameras used to do mapping, which was being used on construction sites. And then from there, actually the agricultural field came into it and started getting the multispectral and hyperspectral cameras in to basically help farmers basically analyze where the crops needed water, where you had pest controls, and how best to apply pesticides, watering, and whether or not they actually estimating crop yields based on that.
Right. Yeah, it is amazing how much it's evolved over a short period of time, the use of drone technology. I do want to, before we get to our next question, I do want to respect the time. I know it's a little bit past 7:30, so if you guys have to go, we totally understand. We do have a few more other questions in the chat though, so if you'd like to hang out and listen to those answers, feel free to stick around. So that actually brings us to the next question, which is, do you think drones in science will continue to grow and sort of change the game on habitat monitoring? Or do you think that flying restrictions and all these crazy costs might limit drone use in science?
The issue is the restrictions on flying drones is not, I don't see it as a big problem because you can get waivers for it. You can take precautions for it. It's just the added layer of planning to go out there and get the permissions and all to fly. You will be able to fly it. Many of the municipalities who have restrictions and where you can or can't take off from literally do have exemptions in there for scientific or government work. So they're willing to let you do it. It's just jumping through all the hoops first.
Yeah, and I
As
would
far-
say from a science standpoint, there's definitely a discussion amongst the wetlands folks at a national level about how we can continue to use some of these technologies to do things we just wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So I definitely think there's a place for it, just like anything. But I definitely, I see a future with these kinds of technologies.
Great, cool.
Yeah, and with that, I see it, getting more and more detailed and coming up with a lot more ways of using the technology to get better data.
Mhm. All right, I'm just gonna go down the line here with other questions. Theo and had a correction with his question. Okay, so do you have any thoughts on RTK drones for salt marsh mapping? My understanding is that they require fewer ground control points to obtain the same spatial accuracy. So I could see that being a benefit when it comes to reducing salt marsh disturbance for a project.
The RTK and the companion PPK, which is basically whether it's real-time corrections or post-processing corrections. It's definitely a boom if you're for the XY, if you're just doing a flat map. Elevations is again, elevations is a problem. But for mapping, especially in a marsh. But yeah, it definitely is a game changer. The biggest problem with it though is one of the big rules for flying drones is you must keep it within a visual line of sight. So you can't really do really large areas with the drone.
Gotcha. Next question, can you use LiDAR to measure the surface elevation through vegetation such as dune or wetland? I think you kind of...
LiDAR will give you more returns than what we can get with the photogrammetry.
Okay.
But if it's really dense vegetation, LiDAR requires that there's enough gaps in the vegetation that it can actually get some returns from the ground.
Yep.
If we have a really dense vegetation like you have on the marsh with the grasses, even with a LiDAR, it's not going to penetrate that vegetation.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, Greg, you're up if you want to take yourself off mute.
Sure. Actually, I didn't see that original LiDAR question, but I was thinking back to, well, hi, Steve.
Hi.
Greg Thackwitz. I've been on board with you once or twice with Rick Latham's group while you guys were operating down in South Jersey. So it's good to see you again. So I'm thinking about back in like 2004 and 2006, we commissioned some LiDAR surveys to actually look at seagrass. And these were plane mounted LiDAR sensors, flying out of, oh gosh, I want to say they were leaving from like Virginia or something. So there was a big expense associated with them. And so, and often, unfortunately, they were running late. And so by the time they arrived, the southeast wind had picked up. We started to get wave action. We started to get a lot of reflection on the surface, and turbidity obviously went up. And so my thought is, but that said, the times that they were on site and the conditions were optimal, we actually were surprisingly successful and pleased with the results. So it was very much dictated by weather and wind patterns and whatnot. So my thought is it would be great to be able to have the flexibility of a, say, self-operated drone, and, you could abandon the effort and not go through the multi-$1,000 rental of the equipment and pilot time. So I was wondering, have you done any work with shallow seagrasses besides the macroalgae project that, the macroalgae that we were getting on those surveys down in like Ocean City and Margate?
Yeah, even when we were out there for that, the first couple of flights we did in the early morning, there was no wind, the water was glass, you could see right through it.
Yep.
With the visual cameras, you're basically limited, depending on sun angle, everything else, to about 2, maybe 3 feet. You can clearly see the bottom on it. And we've gotten very good results seeing the bottom. Even even doing some of the mapping, we've gotten elevations off the bottom. But as soon as the wind starts picking up, I think we hit 5-knot wind, and we were getting enough ripples there. It totally messed up our with the photogrammetry, you need to match pixels, and with a wave action that much, it just messes it up and it just won't show it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that if it's shallow water, we can probably see through it. You could mount the LiDAR. There are LiDAR units for a drone. And like I said, I haven't gotten into the multi-spectral or hyperspectral yet,
Right.
but I started seeing some reports that they were using that for to look at the SAV. So that's something I want to start exploring too. But yeah, you're right. The flexibility of the drone is just it saves you so much money from what you're just saying. You know, trying to coordinate with the pilots. You can't guarantee you're going to get out there at the nice sweet spot where.
Yeah, I mean, that's research that I would love to, at least rekindle and revisit some of the areas, because we did a lot of in situ monitoring over the years. And I know the Barnegat Bay Partnership has adopted some of those locations as well. And so, just the ability to resurvey on like a little bit of a broader scale, in a way that would be conducive to, say, monitoring for things like bed expansion and canopy height would be.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially with the SAV, it's a changeable. It changes so often. It's like, you can map it one year and it's different the next.
Yeah, and we all don't always have, big grants to go out and resurvey, because, being out in the field with a crew of, a minimal crew of 3 people on a boat, for a couple of days over the summer, or a couple of days over each sampling period, there's an expense associated with that as well. And so, if you could say fund those kind of surveys every 5 years, but fill in the gaps in between, with these surveys, you would have both you'd be filling in those year-to-year gaps, but you'd also be ground truthing LiDAR work by, the in situ work as well.
Yeah, whatever we do, we're going to need to ground truth, spot check, whatever. But as we get more familiar with it, what the capabilities are, as the capabilities expand, we should be able to get out there on a regular basis and do this.
Cool. Yep. Good food for thought and a good reintroduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. All right, I don't think there are any other questions in the chat. So I think that's it for this evening. I'm going to just pop my email in if you guys have questions about registration or any questions about the upcoming talks that we have going on. But I want to thank again Martha and Stephen for such a terrific presentation. Learned a lot, and if anyone's interested in rewatching it or sharing this recording with friends, it will be on our YouTube channel probably within the week or so. So you can rewatch it if you want. If another question pops in your head, you can always email me too and can relay the information back to you guys.
I have my email address is in the presentation.
Oh,
so
great.
If you want to contact me directly, feel free.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, Caitlin, the same things for me too.
Okay.
Always happy to talk.
Perfect. Thanks for offering.
Yep.
All right. So with that, I will say good night and thank you once again,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.